was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the latest edition of Views on the News. Now, today we have my favorite panelist. It's retired lawyer from Manchester, Guy Otten. Welcome, Guy. How the devil are you?
Thank you very much, John. But favoritism is probably not a good idea.
Well, maybe not, but in your case, I do value your wisdom and experience to bring to the issues of the news.
As lawyers say, if any, which is not admitted.
Yes. Anyway, starting with item number 1. This is about the city of London, Ontario. Okay. Where a Muslim family were all killed by a vehicle, all except one of them. 3 generations of the Afzal family were taking an evening walk when the vehicle ran over them, and it appeared to have been deliberately steered towards them. So that killed Salman Afzal, 46, his wife Madiha, 44, their daughter Yumna, 15, and the mother-in-law Talat. They all died in this attack using a vehicle. There was a 9-year-old boy who was seriously injured, but he survives in hospital. The driver of the vehicle was a Canadian man named Mr. Veltman, who was 22, and he, according to the reports that were read out to the jury in this case, he wanted to make all Muslims fearful for their safety.
Why?
He doesn't like Muslims.
It's crazy. He's crazy, isn't he? I mean, that the way to defeat, Islam, if that's what he was trying to do, is to go into the marketplace of ideas and explain why Islam is not a good idea, why it's false, why its traditions are untrue, why its ethics are inadequate or immoral. Those are the kind of arguments that we need to deploy. Violence is not going to help. In fact, his murder is likely to inflame radicals and make them more extreme, and possibly think in terms of counter terrorist measures.
Exactly. He's given them a grievance, hasn't he? Yeah. Silly boy. So he now faces 4 first-degree murder charges, 1 count of attempted murder, and he also faces terrorism accusations because the prosecutors are arguing that he targeted the family because of their faith.
Well, yes, but also to make them afraid. Well, that's what terrorism is about, is making them terrified. So he's actually fallen right smack bang into that one.
Yes.
Well, he did it deliberately, didn't he?
Yes.
And this is what all terrorists try to do. They use extreme violence in order to inflict fear, which they think will bring people round to their point of view. It's just mistaken. It actually has the opposite effect.
It's never worked over thousands of years, and you've only got to look at what's going on in Israel right now to see why. Okay, so nearer to you, a little bit south of where you are, in Birmingham, there's a district called Smethwick, where they propose to erect a 16-foot tall, 1-ton rusty steel statue depicting a woman wearing a hijab. It's been constructed by a sculptor named of Luke Perry, who is quite a famous sculptor, and he often draws inspiration from representing represented people. So he's had some of his work put up because it's sympathetic to the underdogs. Here is this statue. Take a look at this, if I can find it. Tell me what you think.
It looks more like an armed soldier, doesn't it? A person in armor.
There he is.
Bad news. I mean, it's supposed to be a woman in a hijab, and I mean, the good news is that it is a really good idea to have more statues of women. Somebody did a census of the statues in Greater Manchester, I think it was, and it was something like 90 men to about 10 women or less. I can't remember the exact numbers. And that isn't right. There are lots of women that we should be celebrating, and ethnic minority women amongst them. We've now got 2 or 3, for instance, suffragettes. There's one in the centre of Manchester. There's one in Oldham that I know of, which is brilliant. But the idea of celebrating an ethnic minority woman is a great idea. It's just the hijab I have a problem with, because that actually represents and symbolizes the oppression of women in Islam. As far as I'm concerned, that's what it says to me. And I don't think we should be celebrating the subjection of women as second-class citizens in our society for whatever reason. And I don't think this is, I mean, some people might think this is an Islamophobic point. I mean, I disagree. I don't actually accept the concept of Islamophobia, because it confuses 2 ideas. It confuses the idea of bigotry against people, which I reject, and legitimate criticism of a set of ideas like Islam, which I think is not just important, it's vital in our society that we maintain that critique. So I think it's the wrong statue. And I understand it's been partly funded by the taxpayer. That's another problem.
Well, I was coming on to that. Yes, it's commissioned by an organisation called Legacy West Midlands, and their remit is to celebrate diversity within that zone. And yes, they have received a grant. And I don't know whether it's specifically for the cost of the statue or just for their general organizational needs. And I haven't been able to find out how much of a grant, but it is thousands of pounds of, taxpayers' money.
I read somewhere that it was in excess of 100,000, but I don't know whether that's the grant to the organization or the grant in respect of the statue.
Yes.
I mean, what's interesting is that lots of towns and cities are wanting to do like an Angel of the North kind of thing, and I think that's a great idea. I mean, I've actually got a great idea for a big statue in Manchester, but it will never be built, because it would celebrate the fact that Manchester is named after Mamucium, which was the Roman name that the Roman soldiers gave to what they thought looked like 2 breasts in the city of Manchester when they camped here in the early.
The hill.
There are two. There's one in Salford, and on the other side of the river. You don't notice them now because they're all built over. There are 2 round hills, one in Piccadilly and one in Salford. That's what the soldiers saw, and they thought, Mamucium. This is the name of this place, Titsville. So I'm afraid that's not likely to be created.
I'd vote for it.
Well, I would. I think we ought to have a campaign, but no, not much support.
Anyway, this one, the title of this one is written on a tablet at the base of the statue, and the title is "The Strength of the Hijab."
Oh
So
my
it makes
goodness.
it clear what the message is. It's not to celebrate women, it's to celebrate a garment which arguably subjugates women.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there is this. I've noticed that there are some very strong Muslim women who do wear hijabs,
Yes.
and I wonder whether, living in that community, in order to survive as a woman with a bit of respect, you have to be pretty tough.
Mm.
So maybe there is something in that, but that's still not right.
Well, in our society, it's possible to get away with a lot of things that other Islamic societies, where the hijab can mean literally life or death if you don't wear it properly, then the message is different, isn't it? Because our women may be exercising a degree of choice, although they obviously are trying to fit in with their culture.
Yes.
Rather than what you might call a more British culture.
The way I see it is that we have human rights standards in the world, and actually the human rights standards are a high morality. They're better than what the religions have in the past sort of bequeathed to us.
That's right.
It's a gender equality issue.
Yes, it's taken us a few centuries to shake off the brutality of the religious culture, which we were subjected to way back 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, and actually more recently, to be honest.
Yeah. Yes. In pockets where the religion still survives as a major force. Yeah. So going to another part of the world, America. In Florida, a woman, Katie Ray, who has had children via in vitro fertilization, and she's been quite open about her journey through IVF, because it's not easy. It maybe doesn't work for the first 2 or 3 goes, and you've got to keep trying and going back and overcoming the problems of not being personally fertile. And having spoken about it on social media, that enabled the Catholic Church in Florida to look her up. And when they discovered that she had committed this, in their minds, sin of in vitro fertilization, they told her that she couldn't host an event on their premises. They've cancelled her.
Bizarre, isn't it? I mean, I didn't know that in vitro fertilization was contrary to Catholic doctrine. But
well,
maybe
neither did I. But apparently, and I'm quoting here, the Catholic Church opposes any kind of pregnancy that doesn't involve one male and one female. So they oppose any technique used to achieve conception by the use of gametes coming from at least one donor other than the spouses. So that includes sperm donation, surrogates, in vitro fertilization, and basically they're against any of that. If you're
I mean, I think this is an example of an immoral precept, and I think they're being, it's unethical to deprive parents of the pleasure and honor and privilege of having children and the happiness that they bring, but for reasons that are obscure and pathetic and are to do with some theological interpretation of something. It's just, I'm afraid that's my view on that. And I'm very sad. It's a bit like their opposition to condoms. Again, What are they trying to do? It puts me in mind of a case I read many years ago of a Catholic church somewhere down your way. Maybe it was Portsmouth or somewhere, where the local yoga club wanted to hire the church hall to have their yoga sessions. And the church said, the Catholic church said, no, this is Hindu, heathen, devilry or something. You think, yoga?
Yes.
You know, for goodness sakes. I mean, it feels like bigotry and prejudice on their part, to be honest.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Trying to impose their archaic views on the rest of us.
Yeah, it's very sad.
And it goes along with this, in the case of some extreme fundamentalists, it goes along with this idea that the only legitimate law is his, and our earthly law doesn't count.
Right, yes.
I can't go along with that.
Whereas I would take the opposite view.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got some good news.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Which is that there's been a survey in America, and it has discovered that political violence is notably high among religious communities. They support political violence, especially if they're white evangelical Protestants. Now, you may ask why that's good news.
Yes, why is it good news? I was wondering about that.
I contend it's good news because it's likely to put more people off. Because at the moment, we already have a rising graph of nuns. And if they come out as in support of political violence, that graph is going to carry on going up. It'd be my guess.
I mean, it's sort of, you know, if I'd been asked about this before the poll came out, I would have thought that was likely to be the poll result. But now that it has gone out, but I probably would have hedged my bets and not said so very forcefully, because it sounds, you know, it sounds as if you're making assumptions. But so it's interesting to have that.
I'm just being my usual optimist, I think.
Yes. Oh, well. Yeah.
So there's another story from America. This is in South Carolina, a district where the Baptist church is very strong. And this particular father, Brad Briscoe, has got a problem with his daughter, because back in September last year, his daughter, who was 16, asked if her 17-year-old female friend could stay with the family for a while because she had problems at home. And as is the case in a lot of families, including mine, you know, it's not unusual for kids' friends to stay overnight. So they agreed to this. But 6 months later, this Brad Briscoe, the father, found out that the two girls had more than a friendship. They had a romantic involvement.
Oh, right.
And he couldn't deal with that. He and his wife claimed that same-sex relationships were not allowed in their home. And so this couldn't happen under their roof. And their daughter at first denied, saying, I'm not gay. But later she admitted that she was in a relationship. And this gets worse because she went to the school counselor and the school counselor backed her in her friendship and took against the parents for issuing these punishments to her, forbidding her to continue with their relationship. And they also punished her for lying to them, because first she said she wasn't gay and then she admitted that she might be, although she was still confused. But because the school counselor got involved, this has blown up into a court case, because the Briscoes think that the school guidance counselor is attempting to separate the parents from their daughter, and and they say it's no business of the school. You know, as parents, we can bring up our daughters, our children, the way we want. And if we want to tell them that, you know, they'll go to hell if they're gay, that's our right.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
I mean, yeah. I mean, presumably the counselor saw his or her role as responding to the distress of the daughter. That's their job. And in the process of that, affirming that the daughter's right to live her life in the way she thought. Do we
Yes.
know how old the daughter was? Presumably a mid or late teenager, was she?
She was 16 when the
Yeah.
friend came to stay, but she's
Yeah.
17 now.
Well, I would have thought that a counsellor's job is to do exactly that. Is not to support sort of anti-gay bigotry, of course, but it is a difficult one. You can see where the parents are coming from.
You can, yes.
I just hope that they get slapped down by the court. But if it's Florida, did you say it was Florida or no? That was the last one.
South Carolina.
South Carolina. You wonder whether that will happen in South Carolina.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So watch this space. I think this is going to come up in our future news.
Well, hopefully somebody will step in and enable her to live separately from her parents and give them a bit of parental support other than the bigoted sort.
Yeah. So staying with the US of A, going to West Virginia, a bit further north than South Carolina. There's another school issue here because the school system is being accused. This is in the second largest city of West Virginia called Huntington. And 4 families are accusing or suing even the school district for having disregarded the religious freedom of its students and instituting Christian religious practices. So let me explain what's been going on. Back in February 2022, evangelical preacher Nick Walker had been leading revivals in the Huntington area during the school day.
Right.
And some students were required to attend, I suppose, by their parents opting for them to go to these revivals. But the problem is that 2 Huntington High School teachers escorted their entire classes to his meetings without, you know, eliciting which of them were required and which of them were not. So 4 families are now suing the school district. And you'd be pleased to hear that a policy mandating annual religious freedom training has been passed by the school district as a result of this lawsuit.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah. And so the Cable County's Board of Education policy now says it's not the province of a public school to either inhibit or advance religious beliefs or practices. Students must remain free to voluntarily express their individual religious beliefs or lack thereof as each student sees fit. That's a bit of real good news.
Well, I mean, that's a good outcome. It is a good outcome. And what seems to be going on in the States is that the religious fundamental right are trying to chip away at the church, the separation of the church and state. And,
Yes.
you know, I know that this is keeping the Freedom from Religion Foundation and Dan Barker and
Yes.
Annie Lee Gaylor very busy
Yes.
with court cases to try to protect their very precious church and state separation, which sadly we have not got in our country yet. Yeah.
But we do have a piece of good news about the UK because, believe it or not, it's about to be introduced in Parliament is a bill to disestablish the Church of England.
Yeah, but sadly, I don't think it's a government bill, and therefore it's rather unlikely to succeed.
Yes.
I mean, you never know, because some private members' bills do get through, but this one is sure to arouse the opposition of a sufficient minority of members, I fear.
Yes.
Make it unlikely. You never know. You never know. But it's a really good thing that it's happening, because it highlights the issue, and the issue really needs highlighting, because nobody's talking about it. We just sort of we gaily accept the fact that we've got an established church, but even bishops and vicars within the Church of England are now saying it should be disestablished.
Yeah, some of them are, yes, indeed. So
you know,
maybe the flow is in the right direction.
I think it is, and there are some Church of England people who say it's actually harmful for the church to be established, because it means that they're sort of bound up with the political establishment and the centers of power in a way that is actually contrary to the essence or spirit of Christianity or something. So I mean, I think it's only a matter of time. I mean, the Church of England's already been disestablished in Wales. It's already been disestablished in Northern Ireland, which is the only part. I mean, obviously it was disestablished in the whole of Ireland when Ireland was part of the United Kingdom. It's never been established in Scotland, where they have their own semi-established Church of Scotland, which is not actually fully established. So it's really now time for the Church of England to step back from its privilege, and really that's the issue for us. It's privilege as much as anything else. That we don't object to. Well, we do object to Christianity. Obviously, we do as atheists, but we support everyone's right to believe whatever they want.
As long as it's not part of our government.
Even if we disagree with it.
As
long as it's not harmful and violent to people, sort of thing. So, but we don't want it foisted down our necks. We don't want people to have a privileged position in society, privileged because they have bishops in the House of Lords, privileged because the king has got to be an Anglican, privileged because in every sector of society the Church of England is given primacy, privileged because they're allowed, along with some other religious groups, to run schools, for goodness sakes, and even conduct. All of these privileges are just not on. It's not, they cannot be defended in a society where we believe in democracy and equality.
Well, you're sounding very like the Liberal Democrat peer Paul Scriven, because it's coming from the House of Lords, this bill, who is steering it, introducing it into Parliament. And you're right, it's not government backed, so it's probably going to be debated in the Westminster Hall rather than the House of Commons. Anyway, we'll see. So he has said, and it sounds very like what you've just said, that disestablishment is long overdue. The church's privileged position is archaic and unacceptable. And the National Secular Society said it's simply unsustainable. And they've been campaigning for disestablishment since 1866.
Right. Well, it's time they had a bit of success on that one. I mean, Humanist UK have disestablishment as one of their objectives as well, fully as a secular society. And of course, Atheism UK believes that it should be disestablished. And I'm be interesting to know who else would want it. Probably the anti-monarchists, I should think. Republic would probably want it. And of course now we heard that there are plenty of people within the Church of England who are talking about it. And I think if you asked people across the country, to actually turn their mind to the question briefly, I think an awful lot would say, no, surely not. No,
Yeah.
The trouble is that an awful lot of people don't really know about it. They're not interested. It doesn't affect them particularly. But I think it does affect the quality of our culture insidiously and of our politics.
Indeed, yes. We've had a number of items on this news show, well, our parent news show, about the effect of an established church having votes in decisions about how religion is taught in our schools, for example.
Yes.
And they're not even elected, these representatives.
That's right. And when the assisted dying bill, the last one, was before the House of Lords, I think I'm right in saying that the numbers that voted it down, which is a very small number, was fewer than the number of Lords against it. So the unelected Lords actually defeated it.
Yes.
And I think that's unacceptable. Yeah.
There you go. Going back to America, again, West Virginia, there's a convict, I suppose you could call him, an inmate. I'm not sure what the terminology has reached now, but it's a gentleman named Andrew T. Miller who did some breaking and entering and was convicted, and he was sentenced to between 1 and 10 years of imprisonment, with a projected release date of April the 3rd, 2025. And of course, you can get time off for good behavior. But in order to prove that his intentions had improved, he had to pass through some hurdles. And this particular one, that's set up by the West Virginia Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation, requires him to attend a program called residential substance abuse treatment. It takes between 6 and 12 months. And after they've passed through that program, they're deemed to be less of a security threat, and they are given remission on their sentence. Okay. Trouble is, this residential substance abuse treatment program is littered with Christianity. It includes the Lord's Prayer, the Serenity Prayer, the famous 12 steps, all referring to a higher power. And elsewhere in the handbook of this course, it says, for our group purposes, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. That's what we were talking about earlier, the higher law. But it wasn't just what's written in this book, because they are required to do homework as well for this course.
Yeah.
And one of the items of the homework is to write an essay titled "What God Means to Me," and another one titled "What Prayer Means to Me."
Yeah.
Now, going back to this guy Miller, T. Miller, he was told to go through the RSAT program. That's the initials for it. But when he realized how religious it was, he asked for an alternative option, because he was willing to do everything in the course except profess a religious faith that he doesn't possess. Okay. They denied his request. Then he made several complaints saying that he had a grievance challenging the denial.
Yeah.
And each time his complaints were complaints about the denial were refused. More denial. His complaints about the denial were denied. And on 3 occasions, so he's still in jail, or at least he was up until this week, because he hasn't completed this religious program. is against his beliefs.
Well,
Meanwhile,
yeah.
American atheists took up the case.
Mm.
Their litigation counsel said West Virginia, like too many states, is forcing Christianity on the people in their prisons as a condition of release.
Yes.
He said, attacks like this on the rights of atheists, humanists, and any non-Christian person who interacts with the West Virginia Division of Corrections are ongoing and widespread.
Mm.
No one. Then it went to court, and you'll like this bit. The Mountain State Justice Attorney, Leslie Nash, said no one should be compelled to sacrifice their moral or religious creed to obtain release from incarceration in West Virginia.
Yes.
Mountain State Justice is proud to work with American atheists to stand up for Mr. Miller's right to follow his conscience and secular humanist beliefs. There's a win for you.
Yeah, it's another of these creeping attempts to chip away at the separation of the church and state. There should never be anything like this in U.S. prisons, and of course this Alcoholics Anonymous tradition, 12 steps, is creeping around.
Yes.
And I think it's, although I believe there is actually a secular version of 12 steps. That doesn't seem to have got through to Virginia yet. But I mean, the good part of this is that yes, it is helpful for people to pursue these courses if they're genuine courses that respect their beliefs and don't try and recruit them for some religion or other.
That's right.
And but that's good, but you know, they need to get their act together with that. And I'm glad that they seem to have seen the point that atheism, that the American atheists have highlighted. Really, that's brilliant. Well, I mean, that's good.
Do you want the good news? Because it gets better. Because American atheists have just announced that Miller is now a free man.
Yep.
Furthermore, the West Virginia District, blah, blah, CR, whatever it's called, is changing its policies. So no one has to go through that ordeal ever again. Instead of using RSAT, they're going to have a substitute available, which is called the Inside Out program. And it's a secular version of the same sort of thing.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. And I hope he gets compensated insofar as he has remained incarcerated for longer.
Yes,
than he would have done if if he had succumbed to this indoctrination.
Yeah, absolutely, yes, he deserves some compensation.
Mm.
Finally, you know, they don't really have the same sort of heinous religious problems that we do in the rest of the world, but Australia, in fact, Tasmania, the island to the south of Australia, has got one of their little problems because they've got a council which it's in a majority non-religious population, but the council begins its meetings with Christian prayers. So two of the councillors have objected, and they've pleaded for the removal of Christian prayers, and they speak quite vocally. If you look at the news item, it comes up at the end of the GAN, the Global Atheist News, you'll see them speaking there and saying things like, nowhere else where I go to a meeting do I have to stand up and speak, you know, the Lord's Prayer or whatever. And it's ridiculous that we should have to do that here. So they asked the council to remove it. Guess what?
They've refused.
They've ignored the pleas.
Yeah. I mean, we do actually have the same problem in this country, don't we?
Yes,
lots of councils start off with prayers, and some have decided not to have prayers, and others have decided to have prayers or a statement or something from different religious groups, including humanists, and I've actually done it
Including
twice
you.
myself.
Yes, including you.
Yeah. So I've done a humanist sort of initial statement, and I'm up for doing it again. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going on at the moment. I have not been asked recently. I wonder if it's gone by the wayside in many councils. I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's a good idea. I could offer to do that too, couldn't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you're a humanist celebrant, it's no problem at all because you're used to doing that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, as president of Atheism UK, I would have thought that I carried.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. On that happy note.
All right.
Thank you very much for your wisdom and
such as it is.
Amusing contributions. Yes, indeed.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about